Phil and Kyle start a podcast, and Rudy Gobert comes to town. Hardly a coincidence. It's Flagrant Howls with Phil Mackey and Kyle Tyke.
And I swear we weren't supposed to have a 2-week hiatus of Flagrant. The plan wasn't, let's come firing out of the gate. Let's get Rudy Gobert in here. Let's get Craig Kilborn on the show, and then let's just stop doing episodes for like 2 weeks. That was not the plan. But here we are. So 2 weeks of traveling for me and company trips, and you were traveling, and then I got smoked with COVID about 5 days ago. I'm still testing positive in my COVID cave here at my home studio, but we are alive, and we are back to talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves on our path as we urge the Wolves to win 50 games for the first time in 18 years, Kyle.
Welcome back. Yeah, it's seems strategic that you and Kirk Cousins both got COVID right before the football season, so you'll be all
we are.
Antibodies are building up, but it's not yet. I mean, I was telling you before we recorded, like I got it in January, and I was just trapped in a room for 5 days, and it was tough. So you still sound like you're going through it, but hopefully you're on the upside now.
It's I went at one point because you just like my wife is. She's got the upstairs part of the house. I've sort of been banished, rightfully so, to the bottom half, and she'll like make me lunch or dinner.
Yep.
Slide a plate under. We have a little back patio, so we have gone outside and spaced out to just eat outside and hang out and stuff. But I was telling you off microphone. So I was on a 2-week sort of Midwest swing through Brainerd and through Milwaukee for a wedding in Chicago. So I was on the road for almost 2 weeks for I guess it was like 15% like wedding and family and stuff, but then the other it was company trips and meetings and stuff for Hubbard Radio. And I told the guys this on our Mackey and Judd and Purple Daily podcast. Sometimes it's a little ambiguous, like, how did you get COVID? I don't know, it could have been this, that. I was sitting on a flight from Chicago to Seattle. What are we we're recording this on a Thursday, so this is a week ago. And I was in the window seat. There was one open seat on the entire flight, and it was the middle seat next to me.
Yep.
It's great.
Yep.
And so there should be a rule, by the way, if there's an open middle seat, I get 50% of the vote, and then the aisle person gets 50% of the vote.
100%.
So the guy in the aisle, his wife was sitting across the aisle in the aisle seat, which is great, by the way. You both get aisle seats, and you can still talk to each other and stuff. And he asked the flight attendant, hey, can my wife come and sit in this row so we can sit right next to each other? And I'm like, I kind of turned my head over like, I don't get a vote here, buddy.
Yeah.
And so he moves over to the middle. She moves across the aisle, which, again, is ridiculous. And he spends 4 hours coughing and blowing his nose into a handkerchief.
Oh, really?
Which is the most disgusting thing ever. He blows his nose, and this happened a dozen times. Like, blows his nose, crinkles it up, shoves it in his pocket. Of course, it's his left pocket, which is next to me. It can't even be his other pocket. So I'm sitting there just mortified. I don't know why I didn't say something at any point during these proceedings, but I'm sitting there thinking, I am 100% getting COVID for the first time.
Yep.
And boom, like 24 hours later, I start to feel. I eventually went on Reddit and was checking out, here are the 12 symptoms you may experience. I'm now in day 5. I think I'm 11 for 12 so far.
16 of the 12, it sounds like. I don't know if you want to. I mean, I've been traveling a lot too, and then I got like a couple Hawaii trips and a Vegas trip signed up. So like, as life gets more normal, there's still like, there's less mass and all that stuff, which whatever. But it's just everyone's going to be sick, so be careful out there. But also too, if we turn this into just an airplane podcast, that drives me crazy. The couples that are in the aisles, just sit there. It's aisles. Aisle seats are the best. Yeah. Like, why would you want to come in the middle? When we were flying somewhere recently, like a couple wanted to sit next to each other and no one wanted to give up their seat. So they sat in 2 aisle seats and just held hands the entire time.
Across the aisle?
Across the aisle. And I was like, yo, I love my wife, and there's no reason you got to do that, man. It's a 2-hour flight. Just like, put your hand, I don't know, just do anything other than
calm
it's like
down.
the cart at one point, like hit their hands and they're like, oh, I guess we have to let go of our hands. It's like, yeah, dude, like don't be a douche. Just your wife's going to land with you. You're fine. Well, I'm glad you're back, though. This is your MJ week because you've been pumping out content left and right.
This is, you're going to have to, if I'm Michael Jordan flu game, you're going to have to carry me like Scottie Pippen here off the court. So there's a million things here that we could dive into, despite it being the dead of the off season. So let's just go through, like, we have a checklist of like 5 or 6 things from the schedule coming out to the Wolves having a new TV voice for Bally's, replacing Dave Benz, Michael Grady. But let's start with this one. And Canis Hoopus, your former place of residence in the Wolves content sphere, has a write-up about this week too. So the Kevin Durant trade talks are done. He's staying in Brooklyn, and it's a little bit vague and ambiguous as to how this all went down, and they're all trying to present this united front, but ultimately we know that Kevin Durant tried to force his way out of the 4 years remaining on his contract. And the word is the Minnesota Timberwolves set the bar so high for what you need to ask for or what teams are willing to settle for in a trade with the Rudy Gobert trade. The Wolves gave up so much for Rudy Gobert that it made it nearly impossible for anyone to acquire Kevin Durant. Are you buying that the Wolves basically broke the NBA's trade value system and maybe helped themselves in the process by keeping Kevin Durant out of the Western Conference, or do you feel like this is all just myth?
That is a great article over on Canis. My guy Michael Hagan wrote it. I think he referred to it as the big bad Minnesota Timberwolves. And I just think this goes back to what we've talked about kind of ever since we started this pod, is that it's just comical, right? Like, it's just comical that like the Wolves are blamed for doing what was in their best interest, right? Like, how many times have we seen big market teams get buyout guys for nothing, or just like, everything is built for the East and West Coast of the NBA, right? More than baseball, more than football. So finally the Wolves kind of, disrupt the apple cart a little bit. And now everyone just is making themselves a sympathetic figure that, we couldn't get any deals done because you made this outrageous price for Gobert. And it's kind of like awesome, right? Because at the end of the day, I still, the Durant thing is done for now, like you said, but I don't think it's actually done. I think Phoenix had a chance to get him. Like I do. And I think if the Phoenix Suns get Durant, that's just a disaster because, they're already probably pegged to finish higher than the Wolves anyway. But if they get Durant for another 4 years, it's just another team in the West that loads up. So do I think, this is a conspiracy theory, Kyle. Like, do I think Tim Connolly did it on purpose? No, I don't think he tried to mess up the trade market. But I also just wonder, as they add 42 different people to their front office and they're all highly respected, if it's not at least something that they kick the tires on, be like, hey, what if we just like add a pick swap just to make this look even more expensive? And it does kind of slow down everyone else so that we can kind of catch up. So, was it on purpose? Probably not. But did it have ramifications that we're kind of seeing now? Probably. And that's kind of cool. That's
kind of where I'm at. Like, it is funny I like the conspiracy Kyle angle. And anytime conspiracy Kyle wants to make an appearance on Flagrant Howls, he is more than welcome to. But so I kind of floated this hot take a few weeks ago, I think, on this show, and when we just kind of tap danced past it. But here's what I don't get. People keep holding up the Gobert trade and the compensation, saying, well, if that's what it costs to get Gobert, can you imagine what it would cost to get Kevin Durant, who's clearly, and again, Kevin Durant is one of the greatest players of all time. He's probably still one of the 5 best players in the NBA. But let's unpack this for a second. Kevin Durant turns 34 years old in September. So before the season, he will turn 34 years old. Again, he tore his Achilles at age 31, missed an entire season. And he's only played around 80, 85 games total the last couple seasons. So it's not like since the Achilles, and he was absolutely durable before the Achilles injury. He was... there was a little load management there for a couple of years in Golden State, but he was largely playing most of the games before the Achilles injury. He is no longer Mr. Durable. He's 34 years old, and there's 4 years left on this super max contract that's going to take him until age 37, on the doorstep of age 38. Rudy Gobert is 30 years old, is one of the greatest defensive players in our lifetimes in the NBA. I think it's harder to quantify his value to a team when you're just watching games and stuff, because so many of the things that he does are like, he's like preventing things from happening that might not always be scored as a block or a rebound or certainly a 3-point shot. You can see Kevin Durant's impact on the court a lot more obviously than you can see Rudy Gobert's. And again, I am not saying necessarily that Gobert is a better player than Kevin Durant. But considering the age difference, considering Kevin Durant's recent lack of durability, the pain in the ass factor, and the age that they're both going to be at the end of the contract, give me a 33-year-old Gobert over a 37-year-old Kevin Durant.
Right.
I actually think it's perfectly reasonable to suggest that the trade packages should be equal, or maybe you should have to pay more for Rudy Gobert. Is that too hot of a take?
No, not at all. And I think the pain in the ass factor is something that people are really scared to talk about, because Kevin Durant is so online that he'll find you. So if he's listening to this, he might get us as well. But I just, Gobert wanted to be there. You don't know with Durant and how prickly he's been. And just, when you want to get out of Golden State after winning multiple titles, like, nowhere is safe, right? Like, why would the Raptors give up Scotty Barnes if, they don't trust that Durant wants to stay there 4 years? Phoenix doesn't know if he wants to stay there for 4 years. Maybe he just wants to bounce around. So I think that's a really good point. Also, too, these same teams that are quietly bitching to Brian Windhorst or Zach Lowe, they never seem to make those same complaints when the Wolves have to pay 1.5x for a free agent because it's Minnesota, right? The Wolves, again, we have agreed, overpaid for Gobert, but they had to. And I don't know if it's bitching so much about the price they paid or just the innovative nature, because that's one thing about this trade that I think was intentional and will spur some sort of change, is that the Wolves gave up, shout out to Patrick Beverley, but the Wolves gave up no players. Like, they gave up, yes, names, Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, but like, they didn't give up a blue chipper to get a Hall of Fame player, to get a all NBA player. And we don't really see that. So some of these teams are just like, we've never really thought of that. We've never thought of just giving up every pick we can in keeping all of our young assets. Like, that's what we're going to do. So that might be something too that just makes these front offices uncomfortable, is that they've never really thought about making a trade like this without, with having the ability to keep their Jaden McDaniels and their Anthony Edwards.
Yeah. I still love, it's been 2 months. It was the first weekend in July, I guess.
Seems like it was 9 years ago.
Yeah. It's been like 2 months. I love that Connollys just came in 5 minutes on the job, basically, with full confidence and said, "Oh yeah, we're gonna trade all of these future assets for Rudy Gobert, and we are gonna break the system. We're gonna blow people's minds. They're gonna think we're crazy, but I'm going to confidently. I don't have to necessarily do something this bold. I could just probably ride it out for 1 year and have a bunch of cap space, and then be bold in a year from now, and then I'll have a better feel for everything in the organization." He came in and confidently said, "No, this is the move. We're going to do this right now."
But I think that's also something that no one else has really talked about, is that he had the safest, easiest job in the world when he got hired. You're taking over for a low-end expectation team. They just made the playoffs. You got a bunch of good guys under contract. That's what Tibbs did his first year, right? He just kind of let the ingredients marinate themselves and see what he had, and then he kind of blew it up. Tim Connolly could have absolutely, I said in May, this is the deepest team the Wolves have ever had. At that time, he could have just let it ride for a year and then oh, you know what? We can't rebound. We can't defend. We need to do this. We need to do that. And I think that's, again, not only did he just in 5 minutes blow it up and just push some chips in, he's convinced. They just did it again this last couple of weeks. They brought in another guy from Denver. Like, they just keep bringing in well-respected front office members to build this Avengers-like front office. And it's these guys are putting their careers on the line to go in on this all-in bet. So I don't know. I think it's pretty cool. And I love to see, as Michael Hagan said it, it's just hilarious to see people think that the Minnesota Timberwolves now are this big market team and everyone's complaining about them.
It's hilarious. Let's keep going down our checklist of things to cover here. So the Timberwolves schedule came out since we last recorded an episode, and they will open the season on Wednesday, October 19th, with 2 home games against Oklahoma City, and then a day off on that Thursday, and then the second home game is against Utah. So you'll get the Utah versus Rudy Gobert reunion there. As you look at the schedule here, and there's 6 ESPN games, There's another 1, 2, 3, 4 at least scheduled TNT games, and then depending on how you feel about NBA TV being a national platform or not. So there's a bunch of nationally televised games on here. What is your biggest schedule take or takeaway?
Yeah, 16 total nationally televised games, but as you said, NBA TV is kind of hit or miss. Jack Borman, who also writes at Canis, put out a tweet, and he broke down by game sets, every 10 games, and in 3 of those 10 game sample sizes, the Wolves have the first or second easiest schedule in the league. It's actually really cool. It's a lot of colors and numbers if you go check out Jack's Twitter page. But I don't know. I mean, the Wolves, that OKC home opener on Wednesday was kind of cool because OKC's got a lot of young guys, including Chet Holmgren. Chet was going to be able to debut in front of the hometown fans. And then, of course, this morning it was announced that he's out for the season with that Liz Frank injury. Which also, quick pivot, RIP to any and all pro-ams, because those aren't happening anymore.
So since we're down that side path for a second, so that pro-am is right down the street.
Yep.
The crossover is literally right down the street, a mile and a half from where I live. And my wife and I, the morning of actually it was I'm trying to think of the timing here. We drove down there. Right? What's that?
Night before, right? Because you texted me dude, I think LeBron's coming to town.
Yes. So we drove down there kind of as it was happening, just to scope out people were lining up the night before, camping out and stuff. So we weren't going to get in line or anything. And there's no air conditioning, which is why the cork got all oversaturated. It was bad. But dude, there were tens of thousands of people just outside the arena waiting to get a glimpse of LeBron and some of these star players. So they've created a really fun vibe at this, Seattle Pacific, Jamal Crawford. This is the same pro-am where Jaden McDaniels dropped 52 points and was just showing ridiculous handles. I mean, it could have been him. It could have been any of these guys, It's crazy.
And these pro-ams, again, I know I kid, but especially the one in Seattle, because I know a guy who helps put it on. And they're big for the community, right? Seattle doesn't have an NBA team right now. So to get all these guys like Jaden and Paulo and Murray up there to kind of represent their city, and then to pull LeBron up. But it was also just weird because we are so, I don't know a better word to say, we're so horny for NBA content in July and August that when LeBron tweeted out the eye emoji, I'm coming to Seattle, everyone was just amped, as you should be, but no one was like, hey, is this a good idea?
Yeah.
Because all I know is if Anthony Edwards is doing pro-ams, I'd be having a stroke. So yeah, it's unfortunate. I do wonder. I mean, I don't think he's going to lose any money off it. I think there's contract stuff that says the NBA actually approved these types of events, but I don't. Chet Holmgren there's a lot of hype. That guy was going to sell a lot of tickets, and for him to just instantly be out for a whole year is a bummer. And as you pull back to the schedule, it makes what I said was the Wolves' first 10-game set is the easiest one in the league. Well, it makes it even easier because you get to play the Thunder twice, and now they are going to be missing one of their 2 or 3 best players. So I thought overall I was kind of impressed by the national TV games. Again, 6 of those you might not even see, but it was recognizable. I mean, the Wolves had, I think, 4 last year, and 3 of them were on NBA TV. So clearly a Gobert bump, clearly the Anthony Edwards recognition, and a lot of home games to start this thing off. So my only, I guess, half fear is that, is this going to take a while to kind of figure out? Are they going to stumble out of the blocks just from a chemistry standpoint? So that could scare you, but at least you have the built-in thing of a lot of them are at home. A lot of them are against bottom Western Conference teams. So this team should really be able to sprint out of the gates and kind of be the team that everyone thought they were going to be when they traded for Gobert.
Yeah, so I think it's 10 of the first 13 games are at home. And I don't have the Vegas over-under win totals here, but I mean, you're dealing with most of the worst teams in the Western and even some case Eastern Conference here. So Oklahoma City twice, Utah without Gobert, and they might still tear it down even more. San Antonio back-to-back, both at home. The Lakers, we'll get to the addition that they just made as well in the last 24 hours. You do have to play at Phoenix on November 1st and then home against Milwaukee. That's a really tough stretch there. But then you get Houston, the Knicks are meh, and then that home game against Phoenix. So, yeah, I think my biggest takeaway here is that they got snubbed on Christmas. I thought the Wolves were a lock to play on Christmas Day. And they could, what are there, 10 teams playing on, a third of the league plays on Christmas Day, and you can't find room for the modern day Twin Towers? Disrespect.
And I also Twin Towers is good. Someone said the Target centers, and I don't know why, but that one's really stuck with me because it's so nerdy. But yeah, I mean, it kind of made me lose hope that they'll ever have a game on Christmas. Because you're just never. I mean, it is about ratings still, and Christmas is all about like the casual fan. So it doesn't matter if you like the NBA or not. You're going to put the Knicks on it. So I don't know who the Wolves are going to beat out down the road. I mean, maybe Memphis, but Memphis had that Golden State kind of drama, so that's why they got thrown in. And then like Dallas, I guess they'd have to lose Luka, but the Wolves might just never have a Christmas game, which is kind of unfortunate because I tweeted this up. Like, you could market the hell out of that leading up to it with like ESPN's always done, and ABC have always done really good commercials. Like there was that one many years ago where they used to wear the sleeves on their jerseys and like they shot 3-pointers and it was like to the like the ball would go in the net at the tune of like some Christmas song. And I was just like, can you imagine if Anthony Edwards was dressed in a Santa costume reading like 'Twas the Night Before Christmas to Ant Jr.? Yes. That would do crazy numbers. So they missed the mark on this, but I guess if you cover the team, you get to have one more day with your family if you like doing that.
So it feels like a lifetime ago, but the Timberwolves do have 2 Christmas Day games in their history. Do you remember them?
Yeah. I honestly was talking to Dana, but I thought it was 0. I have no idea.
So, and I if you would have asked me, Gunna, that I think it was 1. Didn't they have one like a few? So they played back-to-back Christmas Day games. 2016, this was their first one. They played the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think of, that was was that Tom Thibodeau?
What year was that?
2016-17.
Okay, so that would have been, I don't know.
Tom Thibodeau this is the first year of Tom Thibodeau.
Okay.
And KG had retired, so this was like the feel it out Tom Thibodeau year.
Okay.
And then I believe, so the next year then, they played the Lakers. They beat the Lakers on Christmas Day, 121-104. Wow, that was the Jimmy Butler playoff season. So and how quickly we forget about the Tom Thibodeau Timberwolves era. It
would, again, some of it does come into play of like the way they have all 5 games is like they start on the East Coast and they kind of maneuver towards the West. So the Wolves are again in that weird central kind of area, but I don't see why next year they couldn't surpass Denver if the Wolves have a really good season, or maybe Dallas. So there's still hope. But yeah, I mean, I think it's sad because I do think that this is like, I mean, we've said this all summer, but this is the most exciting team they've ever had. So to not get some of that kind of national TV buzz on the biggest day of the year is a bummer, but whatever.
Yeah. I'm okay with them just fly under the radar. They are on a road trip over the Christmas period, so it's not like they're going to, I don't think, maybe they get to go home for a day or something, but they have a game at Boston on Friday night, December 23rd, and then technically they're off Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, but they play in Miami on Monday, December 26th, so they presumably have to fly into Miami on Christmas anyways.
Spending Christmas at Live in Miami will be a great way for Anthony Edwards to celebrate the holiday. No, and I think another one of the scheduling things too is that like the teams are traveling less. So I think the Wolves have 6 times where they play the same opponent, whether that be on the road, like they play Portland, which is a win for me, but like on a Saturday and a Monday, or they have a couple times where at home they play the same opponent. So and then in between those games, they're just kind of staying in cities more, not always traveling back. So that's part of the league's, health and safety stuff, having them travel less miles. But I don't know, it could lead to some off the court content that could be fun to talk about.
Yeah, I like that the league is doing this.
Same.
It's kind of like what baseball does, which is let's just go to a city for a few days and
exactly
knock these games out. Actually, be hilarious if baseball changed to a more travel heavy schedule where, all right, on Tuesday you play at the Rangers, and then you go to Houston the next day, then you go back to the Rangers the next week. You mentioned earlier in the show here Patrick Beverley. Well, he was traded this week to the Lakers. It's funny because he actually said he was doing the ESPN stuff for 2 or 3 weeks. He was on Get Up and First Take, and he was arguing with Stephen A. Smith and stuff. And on one of those appearances, I can't remember how it came up, but somebody asked him, like, talk about the Lakers or whatever. He said, if I was on the Lakers, as constructed, they would not only make the playoffs, but they would be a Western Conference Finals team. I think it was Stephen A. And Stephen A. was pushing back, like, come again? And he said, yeah, they don't, besides LeBron, they don't have any leadership. They don't have anyone to sort of direct traffic and tell them what to do. Now, the Pat Bev and Russell Westbrook pairing is going to be an interesting one, assuming that Westbrook is still a Laker in a month or two from now.
Yeah, it was definitely when he said they have no other leadership outside of LeBron. It was also just like Pat Bev just gets it. He's going to be so good at this when he retires, but it was also just a subtle shot at like Russell Westbrook.
And Anthony Davis.
And Anthony Davis, yeah. But I mean, I think that the trade was, I guess, consummated today or officially announced today, the 25th. But back on August 14th, when the schedule was starting to leak, there was like a tweet by Shams that said the Lakers and Clippers will play on this certain date. And Pat Bev had like quote tweeted it with the prayer hands emoji, which was probably a sign that he already knew on the 14th of August that he was moving. Pat Bev did not seem like he was going to stay in Salt Lake City that long. So I think he's pretty amped. And I actually think, one, it's just a good basketball move for the Lakers, because I think Pat Bev's, give a damn factor is much higher than the Lakers have had recently. But it also probably gives us some more content, because I don't think you can have, there's guys not liking each other. And then there's like Patrick Beverley and Russell Westbrook. Like those guys hate each other. So maybe it's a sign that there's a Westbrook trade to come, but it also is like, if that's the case, I've just written off the Lakers in my, my personal power rankings. So if they go get some pieces and kind of dig themselves out of this, they gave up nothing for Patrick Beverley. Talon Horton-Tucker is nothing in my mind. So they got a good piece, and he's going to be a fantastic Laker. And the Wolves actually play the Lakers early in the season at Minnesota, but they also play the Lakers October 6th in the preseason in Vegas. So that could be spicy. It could be fun. But yeah, I think Pat Bev's going to really enjoy the Laker role. And once again, just Magic Johnson said it today. He's like, I hate Patrick Beverley until he's on my team. And that's kind of how Timberwolves fans embraced Pat as well.
Yeah, I will always have a soft spot now in my heart for Patrick Beverley. I think it was preferably you could have kept him through the different machinations of trades you could have pulled off. He wasn't necessarily an essential piece outside of, for salary matching, but, ultimately you had to find a chunk of money to make it match. And so, it was, probably better to get rid of Pat Beverley 1 year early than 1 year late. And I think hopefully the value that he brought to the organization has rubbed off enough, and now they can kind of move forward. But I'm really curious to see how this Lakers thing plays out as well. But I will say on the Russell Westbrook seems like anyways a big time grudge holder. He gets offended by things. He takes things very personally. He's got rabbit ears, any sort of criticism,
which I love. Sounds like me, actually.
Just anyone who's ever tweeted you with any sort of cross remark, you've got a list. Pat Bev seems like the exact opposite, where
for sure
he's going to come in there and, hey, Russ, let's do it, man. We're teammates.
Yep.
Let's be buddies and let's make this thing work. I don't think he holds those grudges quite to the same extent. So we'll see how it plays out.
And I think I think the reason it probably wasn't going to work in Minnesota is I think they did want to put Jaden in the starting lineup, right? And I don't think Pat didn't want to come off the bench in Memphis, which he was probably right about. He wasn't going to come off the bench in Minnesota last year. So if that was the plan this year, that wasn't going to work. He doesn't want to play for a bad team like the Jazz. So the Lakers thing is like, you're not going to start him and Westbrook in the backcourt together, because that offensively is like, offensively, I think you and I could defend them. Defensively, they might be hounds, but it just, to me, it signals more moves for the Lakers. It also kind of signals more moves for the Jazz with the whole Donovan Mitchell thing. And that has ramifications on Minnesota, because they still have that 2026 pick swap. And it's like, if the Jazz just embrace the tank for a couple of years, there's probably a good chance the Wolves won't have to swap picks down the road, which is kind of important because you have that hanging over your head. So
the Wolves did make a signing this week. Luka Garza, one of the great big men in Big Ten history. He was a second-round draft pick with the Pistons in 2021. He was the 22nd pick in the second round. And he did get some run last year with the Pistons. He played in 32 games, started 5 of them, averaged 12 minutes a game. If you look at his per 36 numbers here, I'm going to stand for Luka Garza here for just a second, all right? If you look at his per 36 numbers, 17 points, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, and an effective field goal percentage of 50.3, which is pretty efficient. It's pretty efficient.
He can play a little bit.
I think they needed another big man somewhere in the mix. I don't know that he's going to wind up sticking or not, but I sort of like this. I stand for Luka Garza. I'm here for this.
And if you have one of those old retro Matt Garza Twins jerseys, you could maybe wear it to the first home game. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the Tim Connolly effect though now, right? Like Luka Garza's not moving the needle other than like for content purposes, but they have a bunch of guys coming into training camp deals that like maybe, I mean, I'm still kind of blown away that Eric Paschall signed like kind of a training camp deal, like, or a 10-day, like, or a 2-way, I should say. Like they're going to have a bunch of other guys show up to training camp that are much more talented than like, guys that pick up off the street. So it should lead to a really competitive training camp, which is kind of what you want. And maybe they discover, maybe Garza goes and plays with the Iowa Wolves for a little bit, but the more good people you're signing to come to training camp, the better. There's no way that this is a bad thing. Will he stick? Probably not, but he definitely has some skill. I think he played in the summer league in Vegas, and I don't know, I caught like a half of the Pistons game. I think he was on the Pistons. He looked pretty good, so that's another nice little move. Tim Connolly hasn't taken the whole summer off.
And then is it CJ Ellaby? Is that the other signing too?
He was with the Blazers last year. He, again, active body. He's been playing, I think, in that Seattle Pro-Am a little bit because he's from up here. Yeah, and again, just another body to kind of throw into the mix and see if he can stick and get hot for you early on. But the Iowa Wolves are going to be like an Alabama football team. Like they're going to be so good because they're just going to have all these guys that probably didn't make the final roster trying to get some run with the G League.
I love it. I love the dynasty that the Timberwolves are building, not only at the NBA level, but just organizationally, all the way down to the.
Did the Wolves ruin the G League? Will be the topic next week on First Take.
The Wolves have broken the system. It is now impossible for any other G League team to compete with the Timberwolves. And then on the broadcast front, Michael Grady was announced as the new Timberwolves TV voice and face for Bally Sports North. So he spent the last few years at the Yes Network in New York, more specifically Brooklyn, as the Nets courtside reporter. He did some backup play-by-play. There's some clips floating around if you want to hear what he sounds like, getting excited to call. There was a Kyrie Irving 50-point game that he was the play-by-play man for. And he's done some other side hustle media gigs too here. But everyone, I've never met him before, but everyone that I've talked to this point has raved about. I got an unsolicited message from someone who works, he's got his finger on the pulse of all sports media, and he lives in New York and watches Knicks and Nets games all the time. And he's like, dude, this is a great hire for you guys. I didn't even know this was a thing, but congratulations to you guys. So everything I've heard has been raving reviews about Michael Grady. What did you think when you saw that?
Yeah, and my biggest thing was like, will Jim Pete like him? Because like Jim Pete's a legend. I think by all accounts, Jim Pete was pretty excited. And it kind of fits everything we thought. We knew when they parted ways with Dave Benz that they were going to try to go big game hunting again on this topic. I think there may be some names they probably reached out to before, just maybe unattainable people. But I think they kind of didn't settle by any means, but they got a guy who like kind of studied under Ian Eagle, who was one of the GOATs and was also like very kind of Swiss Army knife during his time in Brooklyn. Like he did, like you said, like post-game, pre-game, sideline stuff. Like he kind of did it all. And by all accounts, he's just like an awesome guy who I think you also just want to like throw into the deep end of like the community. He's going to be really active in Minneapolis and with a bunch of charities and stuff. So I think it's going to be really cool. And for the stuff that matters to fans is like, he was also really good calling games. Like he has a lot of passion. He's really smart. So as I say, and I'll say this again until something happens, I'm just kind of waiting for like new ownership to like stumble and mess something up. But this again seems like a really good move to pair with a bunch of other, really good moves. So I think the new ownership pairing of Laurie and Rodriguez is like continuously looking at ways to improve this organization. And they did it again.
And I think I don't know exactly how old Michael Grady is. He doesn't look very old.
I think he's 39.
Okay, I was gonna say he looks like mid-30s maybe. So I guess the big name that was floating out there a month and a half ago, I think Charlie Walters from the Pioneer Press said that Gus Johnson that they had either reached out to him and Gus called Wolves games in the 90s when Gus was in his 30s and rising up through through the ranks. But, I think they were probably big game hunting on that level. I'm guessing they probably reached out to Gus and maybe a couple other big, household name types.
Right, yeah.
And maybe Michael Grady was on a short list, but further down. But I kind of like this. I kind of like, find someone that can maybe settle in for the next 10, 15 years.
Right.
A guy in his 30s who can grow into the city, grow into the roster, grow in with Anthony Edwards here. And however long Jim Pete wants to do it, because he's one of the best in the business.
Yeah, and the big game hunting thing doesn't necessarily always mean you go get someone, like you said, that's well established. Like the names you dropped, it also could just be someone who you've identified as an up and comer. And again, this guy has kind of done it all in the like analyst announcer chair, like all different levels, all different spots in the court and stuff. So I'm really excited. And again, I'm guessing Jim Pete had a pretty big say in this, because again, they're gonna. When you do those two jobs, you're not just coworkers. Like, you got to be friends. I mean, Jim Pete said that Dave Benz was one of his best friends. So I imagine he's on board with this, and it should just again hopefully add to the viewing experience for this upcoming season.
Amen. Well, I'm on a minutes restriction here in terms of my COVID load management. So do you have any other final Wolves takes or thoughts off this week's sort of notebook episode that we've cobbled together?
No, I think so. It's the 25th. Tomorrow's the 26th. That's how calendars work. I think we're probably a month out exactly from Media Day. So while we are all doing fantasy drafts, like, it's going to be here before you know it. And then Media Day turns into training camp. And then training camp turns into, I think, their first preseason game is against the Heat on October 4th. So I know it's been dry and now we're back, but I think the season is going to be here before we know it. So we'll probably get some jerseys announced soon, and maybe random hire here or there, but we're pretty much, this is the team, this is the group on and off the court, and you got a couple weeks to get ready.
Let's get it. And you and I are putting our heads together. We're going to have some guests on here in the upcoming weeks too. And if there's anyone that you guys would like to see us, either from the Wolves sphere of potential guests or just the NBA sphere, let us know, and we can effort here. I think the next 2 months are a good time until once the season starts. Man, we're just going to be so full of takes.
I know it's going to be so awesome.
We don't want guests to be sullying our our court for takes here. So, all right, we just want the Timberwolves to win 50 games for the first time in 18 years. 50 is nifty.
50 is nifty.
And the other phrases you can help us with out there. And you can always hit us up too in the YouTube comment section on the Score North YouTube channel, where you can consume this show in visual form. And if you are listening on Apple or Spotify, if you could give us a 5-star rating and a positive raving review on Apple Podcasts, it'll help spread the word about this Wolves community that y'all are helping us build here. So, all right, Kyle, good stuff. I'm going to go back down to my COVID cave here.
Be safe out there.
See you guys next time on Flagrant Howls.